Hello and welcome back to school. After going through this lesson, you are expected to identify the steps of a scientific method. Use the scientific method in solving problem through an experiment and relate scientific method in daily life. What is scientific method? Scientific method is the process by which science is carried out, as in other areas of inquiry. Science through scientific method can build on previous knowledge and develop a more comprehensive understanding of its topics of study over time. So basically, ang scientific method ay ang basic procedure sa paggawa ng research. On the right side, you can see the step-by-step procedure of the scientific method. So we have observe, question, research, hypothesis, experiment, test the hypothesis, draw conclusions, and then the report. In some cases, you cannot see research. Basically, we only have observation, question, hypothesis, experiment, draw of conclusion, and the recommendation or the report. Okay, so let's discuss each procedure. Okay, let's begin with making of observation. So when you are making an observation, you are using your 5 senses. Those are sense of sight, sense of smell, sense of touch, sense of hear, and sense of taste. Okay? Let's say, for example, a student noticed that ice melted fast in water. Okay, just like you, some students are curious about these things. Okay, with this observation, you may now come up with a question. Let's say the question you are thinking is, does ice melt faster in different liquids? Okay, so this will become your problem. Now let's proceed to research. Although in a basic procedure of scientific method or step-by-step procedure of scientific method, research is not there. Researching is also important because sometimes there are existing answers or solutions already in a question like this. Alright? So, if the answer is already existing, then there's no need to repeat the research. Or you can repeat the research but you have to do some changes about it. Okay? There will be modification. Babaguhin nyo ng kaunti yung research. Yun yung tinatawag na innovation. Okay? But, if on your research wala pang sagot doon sa tanong ninyo or doon sa problem ninyo, wala pang solution, then that's the time for you to think about an experiment. Okay? But of course, we need to follow the procedure. So after the research, the 4th step is formulating the hypothesis. Now, to develop a hypothesis or prediction, prediction means hula in Tagalog. Pero, hindi lang tayo basta-basta nanguhula ng hypothesis. Okay? So, the hypothesis should be the possible answer to your problem or to your question. Possible answer or possible solution to your problem. Okay? So, let's say for example, the problem is, what happens to the growth of mango seeds if table salt was added to the soil? So, ito ang problem mo, kunwari. And then, mag-iisip ka ngayon ng magiging sagot niya. Okay? Possible na sagot. Posibleng sagot. Let's say ito ang naisip mong hypothesis or possible solution to your problem. If the amount of salt added to the soil increases, then the growth of mango seeds decreases. Okay? So, sa tingin nyo ba tama ito? Walang makapagsasabi nun. So, definitely, this is not the exact answer. That's why we need to test the hypothesis. And that's the reason why we need to proceed to the next step, which is experimenting or experimentation. Okay, before we proceed to the experimentation, let's have another example of formulating a hypothesis from the second question or second problem. Let's say the second problem is tomato seeds may grow faster in colder temperature. What would be the hypothesis? So, manghula tayo ng possible answer to this. And then we came up with, if tomato seeds were planted in colder temperature, then the seeds will grow at a faster rate. Do you think this is a good answer? Do you think this is the right answer? We'll never know until we test the hypothesis. So now, we are going to proceed to the experiment. Okay, how do we make an experiment? In making an experiment, we have to think about the materials that we are going to use. But how are we going to get those materials? How do we test a hypothesis? We need to know the variables. Alright? To make it valid, an experiment will become valid if there is a right way of experimentation. We need to design it perfectly so that we can get the accurate result. There are three very important variables. The first one is the independent variable. The second one is the dependent variable. And the third one is the controlled variable. Now, let's talk about first the independent variable. Okay. Now, para mas madali, we can call this as the cause, and then the dependent variable is the effect. The independent variable is the variable that is being manipulated or altered. Ito ang materials sa isang experiment na dapat magkakaiba or binabago. Ang dependent variable naman is the effect that arises from the changes in the independent variable. Since sinabi natin na ito ang effect, ibig sabihin that whatever happened to the manipulated variables or independent variables, ito ang magiging resulta, ang dependent variable. Siya yung magiging effect ng tinitest natin na independent variable. Kung medyo magulo at hindi maintindihan, nandito ang isang example. The problem is, how does fertilizer affect the growth of plants? As you can see, I colored the word fertilizer red, which is our independent variable. So, terno sila. Ginawa ko siyang red para ma-distinguish natin na ito ay independent variable. And then, the growth of plants will be the dependent variable. Okay, so let's see. The fertilizer is the independent variable. Okay, sa isang experiment, kailangan merong mga plants na lalagyan ng fertilizer at may mga plants na hindi lalagyan ng fertilizer. Ano kayang mangyayari sa mga plants na may fertilizer at sa mga plants na walang fertilizer. Okay? So, kung ano man ang mangyari sa experiment, makikita natin ang result sa pamamagitan ng pag-observe ng paglaki ng halaman. So, ang growth of plants ay nakadepende kung may fertilizer ba or walang fertilizer ang halaman. Nakuha nyo na ba? Okay? So, ang dependent variable ay ang effect ng independent variable. Nakadepende ang growth of plants sa kung merong fertilizer or wala ang halaman. Okay? So, the independent variable is the amount or the presence of fertilizer. Kung nitrogen man na fertilizer yan, or potassium, or phosphorus, basta kung anumang fertilizer yan na present or not present. Yun ang ating independent variable. Okay? Manipulated siya. Nababago siya. Okay? May fertilizer, merong walang fertilizer. Now, what are the dependent variables? So, these are the growth of plants in terms of height. Titingnan natin yung height ng halaman na may fertilizer at halaman na walang fertilizer. Kung lumalaki ba o hindi. We can also look at the number of leaves. Okay? Kasi malalaman natin kung lumalaki ba ang halaman kapag nadadagdagan ba siya ng mga dahon. The third variable is the controlled variable. This should be kept constant. Lagi siyang pareho. Laging equal ang amount. Okay? So again, the same problem, how does fertilizer affect the growth of plants? Ang independent variable natin is the different amount or the presence of nitrogen fertilizer on the plants. Okay? And then the dependent variable is kung lalaki ba yung halaman or dadami ba yung dahon. Now, ang controlled variable naman is yung palaging magkakatulad. Okay? Or palaging pare-pareho ang amount. Let's say, for example, ang water. The same amount of water and the sunlight received by plants. The same temperature. The same amount and type of soil. The size of the pot. Lahat yan dapat pare-pareho. Bakit? Kapag merong isa dyan na hindi magkapareho, hindi natin makukuha ang accurate result. Kasi ang tanging sinesearch natin dito or tinetest natin dito is yung effect ng fertilizer sa growth of plants. So, ang lagi lang na maiiba, ang ma-change or maa-alter dito is yung fertilizer. The rest of the materials should be the same. Now, here's a picture of a setup of that experiment. Okay, so there are 6 plants there. Hinati natin siya into 2 groups. Okay, let's say this is group A and then this is group B. Itong group A na to and group B na to, as you can see, pare-pareho sila ng type ng halaman. They have the same type of soil. They have the same size of pots. Okay? They are also exposed to the sunlight and they are receiving the same amount of sunlight. They are all located in the same area with the same temperature, which is 30 degrees Celsius, so medyo mainit. And they are both receiving the same amount of water. The only difference in this experiment is set A or group A has fertilizer, but group B has no fertilizer. Alright. So, yung nakita nyong picture, eto na yung procedure niya. Okay? So, it can be written like this. A group of pupils tested the effect of fertilizer on the growth of plants. They used 6 plants that are all 15 centimeter tall. They grouped the plants into two, Group A and Group B. They watered the plants in Group A with 200 ml of plain water and Group B with 200 ml of fertilizer solution. So, nakita nyo doon sa isa, water ang lagay. Dito naman, water din but with fertilizer, kaya fertilizer solution ang tawag. They watered the plants twice a week with the same amount of water and exposed them to the same amount of sunlight. And after 3 weeks, they measured the growth of the plants in each group. So this is how you write the experimental procedure. Very easy, right? Okay, now after 2 weeks, the researcher record the data. So in this part of the scientific method, ito na yung record and analyzing the results. Okay? So nasa gathering of data na tayo. Now, there are different types of presentation of data. So this one is in the form of a table. Okay. So they record the height of the plant or the initial height of the plant before the treatment or before watering with water and fertilizer solution. So, mineasure muna nila yung height bago yung experiment ng group A at saka ng group B. Okay? And then, dinidiligan nila yung parehong group ng twice a week. Okay? And then, this is the treatment that was given for 3 weeks. Okay? So, yung group A, it receives plain water, 200 ml. Pareho din ang amount ng group B, but it has fertilizer solution. Now, after 3 weeks of observation, they learned about, or they measured the plants, and they found out that set A or group A is or are all 18 centimeter tall, approximately 18 centimeter tall, while group B, which received the fertilizer solution, measured 32 centimeters approximately. Okay, did you see the difference? So, alin ang mas mataas? Group A or Group B? Okay, can you see now the effect of the fertilizer on the experiment? Okay, now you need to explain this data with this guide question. Okay? Hindi tayo pare-pareho ng research na ginagawa. But you can explain this in the form of paragraph. Sometimes you don't need these questions anymore. You just only need to explain the data just like what I did. Okay, but guide questions like this one can help you write the explanation. So all you have to do is to answer the question. Which plant has the greatest growth rate? What factor affects the growth of plant? And what is the table all about? Now, after gathering the data and explaining and analyzing and explaining the result, you can now draw the conclusion. Okay? Looking at the analysis of your data, see if the information you gathered answers your problem. Nasagot ba nung mga data na nagather ninyo yung tanong ninyo doon sa first step, which is the problem or the question? Nasagot ba? Check if it proves or disproves your hypothesis. Okay. Yung hypothesis nyo ba ay approved or hindi? Please note that your conclusion answers the problem. Example, I therefore conclude that applying fertilizer affects the growth of a plant. Okay? So, meron pang kasunod yan. You need to support this sentence with the data you have gathered on the analyzing or on the analysis of the data. Okay, as a summary, here is the step-by-step procedure of scientific method. So first, you ask a question. Second, you do a background research. And then you construct a hypothesis. And then you test with an experiment. Now, in the experiment, you have to see if the procedure is working. If the procedure is not working, if it's no, you need to troubleshoot the procedure. Okay? Kung sa tingin nyo, yung experiment nyo ay may mali, kailangan yung baguhin yung procedure ng experiment nyo. Carefully check all steps and setup. Okay? Pag maayos na ulit ang procedure ng experiment, pwede kayong bumalik sa pagtetest ng experiment. Kapag okay na, if it is working already, then you can now proceed to analyze data and draw conclusions. Okay. If the results are aligned with hypothesis, you can communicate with the results. Ibig sabihin, kung ang resulta ng data na nagather ninyo ay sumasagot sa tanong or align doon sa hypothesis, then pwede nyo na siyang i-communicate or pwede na kayong magsulat ng conclusion at pwede nyo na rin itong i-report o i-share sa ibang tao. Okay. If the results align partially or not at all with hypothesis, kapag medyo hindi sumasagot sa tanong or sa problem ninyo or hindi gaanong nagmamatch sa hypothesis yung inyong nakuhan data, pwede kayong bumalik sa experimental data or dun sa pagkakonstruct ng hypothesis. Okay. Experimental data becomes background research for new or future project. Ask new question, form new hypothesis, and experiment again. Okay? So again, pag hindi nyo gaanong nakuha yung tamang sagot, okay, hindi iyon yung sinabi nyo sa hypothesis, hindi nyo nakuha yung tamang solution sa problem, then you can recommend that this experiment or this research can be improved in the future. Okay? Naintindihan po ba? Okay. Thank you for listening, and if you have question, just PM us your science teacher.